I'm Lily too. I am the Vice President of Sage Advisory, which is a $16 billion investment grade fixed income manager based out here in Austin, Texas. And today I have Ralph Goldsticker, who is the Chief Investment Officer, CIO of Allen Biller and Associates, which is a $100 billion consulting firm that primarily focuses on Taft-Hartley plans, also known as multi-employer plans. So thank you, Ralph, for joining me today. And thank you, Tide and Grace Reyes, for inviting us.
Thanks, Lily. I'm happy to be here.
So where are you zooming in from today?
I live in San Francisco, so I'm dialing in from home, and our office is in Menlo Park. So nice thing, I'm saving my hour-and-a-half commute each way.
During this, 1 year off or 1 year working from home, have you developed any new hobbies? What have you been doing?
Yeah, so I haven't developed any new hobbies. Most of my off time I spent hiking, hike a couple days a week. And what changed in the pandemic is rather than hiking in groups, we've just been meeting for lunch. We discovered this about a year ago when this first started. We sort of stopped hiking as a group and hiking just by ourselves or one or two other people. We were having lunch at the Mountain Theater up at Mount Tam, big space room for a couple thousand people, just sitting there. A couple of friends walked through. They invited them to join us for lunch. We said that's a good idea. And so now since then, we've basically been sending emails around saying, here's we're gonna meet for lunch this week. And then so people hike by themselves, small groups, gather for lunch and then split up. So it's nice. We can maintain the social aspect, but still, not hike in groups and, get that kind of exposure to being around that many people. The other thing that's changed is I've had a lot more time for reading since I'm not spending all that time on the train. I've still spend a couple hours a day walking. I've been listening to books, got a couple hours a day. So over the course of a year, they get a lot of time to listen.
Are you listening to anything fun right now?
I just got done listening to Catherine Graham's autobiography. Catherine was a publisher of the Washington Post, and now I just started listening to a book about the Grand Canyon.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And speaking of the Grand Canyon, is there I think there are a lot of people who are looking forward to, getting vaccinated and returning to some sort of normalcy and traveling again. Are there any places that you're looking forward to traveling to?
Yeah, so I have hiked across the Grand Canyon, but on my bucket list that's been there for a while is the high route, which is a route that goes from Chamonix to Zermatt, or basically Mont Blanc, to Matterhorn. So that's been on my bucket list for a while, and we'll see if I can get that organized as soon as we can travel again. And my wife's interested in going to Antarctica.
That'll be a fun trip. both will be. Well, that's great. Glad you've been able to, kind of keep sane with hiking and listening to books. And, I think we're all looking forward to returning to some sort of normalcy here. But Ralph, it would be great. I think our listeners would love to learn a little bit more about you and your background. So if you don't mind giving us, just a few minutes on how you got to become the CIO of this $100 billion consulting firm.
Sure. So started out this business a long time ago. I got my MBA at UC Berkeley in finance. And my first job was at Wells Fargo Investment Advisors, building risk models. I was there for years and then left, and we started what would now be called a fintech. I don't think the word existed back then. But so building risk models, portfolio analytics systems, investment tools. And then went from there to a mutual fund company down in Houston as director of equity research. So I got some exposure to fundamental equity research as opposed to my background at then had been primarily quant. Then went from Houston back to the fintech, and then joined Mellon Capital doing as director of research. Mellon's projects back then was primarily asset allocation, GTA, global tactical asset allocation. And so I was there for, I guess, about a total of 16 years. And then left there and joined Allen about 5 years ago.
Great. So you've really moved from from the asset management side of things to the asset allocation side of things. How has that transition been for you?
So it's funny that over the course of the last number of years of my career, I've been moving closer and closer to wearing an asset owner hat. So whether it's asset owner or asset allocator, it's very similar. And so at Mellon, products were very much asset allocation, global asset allocation. So was thinking about those kinds of problems. I took the lead on developing custom solutions, multi-asset class, multi-manager solutions for a number of our clients at Mellon Capital. And then the last few years at the bank, we put together a solutions team focused on providing, advice solutions to our largest asset management clients. And so that was very much a consulting type of role. So when I left the bank and joined Allen, it was just a natural step.
Just thinking about asset allocation now in this current environment, yields are still relatively low. I mean, we've seen some steepening of the yield curve. But just curious, I've heard various thoughts on fixed income, but what are your views on the role of fixed income now for Taft-Hartley plans?
Yeah, and so people want fixed income to be what it once was when yields are much higher. I view fixed income as very much a low volatility, just volatility dampener. It'd be nice to get higher returns out of it, but a lot of the products being proposed as fixed income alternatives have potentially significantly higher volatility, a lot less liquidity, and because volatility, they're also, to the extent they're absolute return strategies, reliant on alpha manager skill to generate that return, as opposed to a structural return, interest rates as low as they are, positive return, but having something that's systematic as opposed to relying on the manager to be skillful and generate that return that managers are hoping to get, the clients are hoping to get.
Right, right. And you wrote a really great piece that I was reading, Performance Chasing, which, really highlighted, sticking to an asset allocation, even if, maybe at the present moment, the market's not in your favor. Can you talk a little bit about your piece and your thought process behind that? Because I do find that a lot of people do chase performance, right? You get what people like to call FOMO, right? Fear of missing out on great returns. So, how do you keep disciplined, and how do you help your clients understand the need to kind of stick to an asset allocation? Because it's hard, right?
It's hard, and every document you get in this industry, there's a big disclaimer: past performance is no guarantee of future. And people read that and immediately forget it or misread it and said past performance is indicative of future performance.
Right.
And so the piece you're talking about, I really want people to look in a mirror and look closely in a mirror and think about their decision process, because it's about decision making. It's, we can't control the outcome. There's just too much chance out there. What we can do is make the best decisions. And so I, focus on things like, if you find yourself talking about performance in the present tense, the stock market is going up, this manager is doing well, it may indicate a predilection that you're thinking about extrapolating performance as opposed to saying, yeah, market went up last year, but what's going to happen next year, as opposed to it's went up last year and it's going to continue going up. Similarly, you can look at your past behavior. Do you find yourself, trading when something goes up, buying more of it? Do you have a manager that's had a tough year that you fire them, and maybe it makes more sense to top off that manager? It's tough to do, but it's often the right decision. And same thing with asset allocation. We have a conversation with lots of clients the last couple of years when the U.S. has been the winner. So why do we need any of these international stocks? The U.S. is doing so well, and trying to say the U.S. has done well. I won't say it's doing well.
Right.
And think about diversification. There's no guarantee that the U.S. PE multiple is going to continue to expand faster than the rest of the world, that earnings will be better, the rest of the world's cheaper. And so it's about making decisions on a forward-looking basis, as opposed to regretting that you missed out last year and trying to hope it keeps going for another year.
When you are speaking to managers and when you are looking at asset allocations and trying to potentially shift, what are you looking at? How do you evaluate managers right now?
Yeah, so in terms of asset allocation, we focus on, we develop forward-looking 10-year returns, which we use. We don't do much tactical, I guess, or formal processes. We reserve the right to swing up that pitch, but for the most part, we develop our long-term asset allocations and stick to that. In terms of managers, we have a fairly rigorous underwriting process that, in terms of what I'm looking for, is my two favorite questions for managers or a research team when they're underwriting managers is, what's the manager's edge and why is it going to persist? And get them from stop thinking about this manager had a great 3 years or 5 years. Our process, we have a research team, and their job is to underwrite managers and identify people we should have high confidence in. For the most part, each team person is focused on asset class or two: public equity, public fixed, private equity. And then they'll go out and start looking for managers and trying to find people they have confidence in. So the way it works, we have in each asset class a preferred list. And the research analyst job is to come to our first research committee with their highest conviction managers. And then there'll be a dialogue. They'll have done their homework, talk to managers, done their due diligence and say, I think these are 3 managers we should add to the preferred list.
Right.
And our research committee is the senior investment people of the firm. And we'll have that conversation. What about this? What about that? Often like to get a second analyst in that room to act as a devil's advocate and say, we don't like this manager, or you shouldn't like this manager for this reason. So it's tough to get someone to ask the tough questions of their peers, but it's really helpful to get that devil's advocate in the room. And so there'll often be a couple iterations going back and forth between the researcher and the research committee before we finally settle on a short list, which we'll then bring to our investment committee and bring it there. And then the investment committee makes the final decision, which managers in a preferred list and then which don't.
After having read your other article, Overconfidence Resulting in Failure to Diversify, I assume that roster of managers that you have is extremely diversified across all the different asset classes and
so
different
in terms
styles.
Of diversification, so we have buckets or preferred lists for U.S. large cap, core, growth and value. Mid and small, we typically stay just a core. And fixed income, we have core bond managers and multi-sector. But in terms of diversification, there's managers, think more about diversification manager style. If you have a growth manager, you want a value manager. Or we think a lot about, what calculate the correlations between managers' alphas. And if you look at a track record, if 2 managers perform well at the same time, report at the same time, you want to diversify. And so we have what we call a portfolio review committee, which goes through client portfolios one at a time, and look at the roster, look at the manager lineup. Is there someone who we need to rotate out? Is there someone we want to add? Is a portfolio diversified? Are they over concentrated in managers? I know the clients, they have managers done really well, and it's hard to get them to lighten up and diversify across managers. But a common theme in these meetings is, think about manager diversification. You don't want to have all your money with just one manager, because no matter how good they are, every manager stumbles every once in a while. And, if you absolutely convinced that you can stay with that manager after the stumble and ride it out the cycle, that's fine. But my experience is most asset owners don't have that patience. And they love managers until they stumble, and then they want to fire them, which is probably the wrong time. So if you're going to hire, high conviction, high tracking error manager, you need to be convince yourself that you're going to stay with them through the cycle and not fire them at the bottom of the cycle.
No, that's great advice, because I have seen that time and time again where, people stick to a manager that's done really well, has had a great historical track record for 5+ years. And then the minute, the tides turn, they kick them to the door, right? And that's exactly the wrong time to be
It is, and often they don't even look at, is that performance unexpected? You can look at the past track record. Let's say underperformed by 5%. Had they underperformed by 5% in the past? This is just normal. Or if they have a 5% tracking error and they're down by 7, that's 1.5 standard deviations. And so it's not unexpected. So you need to calibrate it, as opposed to, just saying, oh, the manager stumbled. Yesterday was a genius. Today he's an idiot, and now I'm going to fire him or her.
Right. And so I assume you have a lot of these type of conversations. I mean, consultants do it a lot, but with the trustees of these Taft-Hartley plans, like, do they often, if they see a manager not doing well, do they often say, let's find another manager? Like, what are some of the conversations that you have with clients regarding, diversification and just manager selection?
Well, most of my conversations are actually with our consultants. We have a portfolio review committee, which has me and some other senior consultants, and just get a more broader perspective. And so I don't necessarily go to all the client meetings. We have too many clients. They only drag me in when they sort of need someone with a little bit of gray hair, a little bit of gravitas to push a point. But it's, 2 things. One, diversify. They had a manager that's had great success, But there's lots of good managers out there. And so, talk about diversifying among managers is probably one theme, we talk about. And then the other is this asset classes. We've talked about, US versus international, and, talk about, trying to focus on making good decisions is what it's all about. And the outcomes over the long run will work out. But I can't guarantee you good outcomes, especially in the short run, but I can work with you hard to make sure you're making good, solid decisions.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Rolf, because in one of your articles that you wrote, it's about good decision making, right? And I believe you had quoted several books, one of them which was by a woman named Annie Duke, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was such an interesting article, just talking about how do you make decisions. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was writing this book about overconfidence, and stumbled across Annie Duke's book. So Annie is a PhD in philosophy who wrote this book about playing professional poker, and she improved her game enough. She actually played at the top levels of poker. And it's a poker book, but it's really about decision making under uncertainty. And so she talks about that kind of decision making. The title of the book is Thinking in Bets. And the idea is that you need, instead of market's going to go up or I'm going to win, what's the probability? How much money am I willing to put on the line to stand behind my decision? We can all throw comments out there. I'm confident in this, but if you force yourself to put money on the line and pretend you're putting money on the line, it's going to force you to think about how confident you are in that. And she talks about decisions, and one of the themes she talks about is good decisions versus good outcomes. And all we can control is our decision making. The outcomes are going to happen. Interesting story she talks about. She was working with this one professional poker player who's really his coach, and she'd do a postmortem with him after a tournament, and she wanted to talk about hands she lost or hands she won, and he wanted to talk about we all take bad beats, and it's frustrating if you play poker, but it's frustrating to lose a hand you should win. But he had no interest in talking about the hands she lost that she shouldn't have, as much frustrating as it is. He just wanted to focus on, did you make the right bet? And if so, let's move on, as opposed to saying, I had the best hand going in and my opponent got lucky and I lost my money. And well, you just have to get over it, move past it. And it was interesting, her coach was really forcing her to focus on how she played the game and forget the hands that she lost, that she should have won, because we never remember the hands that we should have lost, but we did win.
Right. No, that's great. And so, you're clearly an avid reader, and you clearly have focused a lot on, the process of decision making. And one of the things I'm always curious about, you've made it so you're so successful in your career, you're the CIO. What piece of advice would you give someone who's just entering the financial services field and wants to eventually become a CIO?
Well, so there's, the practical. And so first, you need to find the niche in the business that makes sense to you. We all work too many hours. If it's not fun, you're not working with smart people, people like working with, you can make a lot of money, be successful. I don't know if you even be successful, but it's no fun. The advice I give to a lot of people is, figure out where the money's going to. So purely in terms of career advice, I grew up in a world which is dominated by ERISA, defined benefit plans, big corporate pension plans. That world is shrinking.
Right.
It's slowly. It's too bad. I think traditional pension plans are a much better solution than defined contribution. But the world is what it is, and so in terms of career advice, look at where the money is going, and you'd rather be in front of that money flow as opposed to getting your piece of an expanding pie, as opposed to fighting for a piece of a shrinking pie.
So I'm going to have to ask, where's the money going?
Well, I think it's going to wealth. It's going to defined contribution, or probably the two. In retail, so you have family offices. Retail is a little bit different. You got robos out there. It's different in each, but it's not going into public plans or out there. They're not sure they're going to go away. Endowments and foundations, I think, you're here for the long run.
Yeah.
Like I said, the corporate plans that I grew up in are disappearing. I just read an article, so a headline today that someone, like who it was now, just sold off $2 billion worth of liabilities and just bought an annuity and they're just getting those liabilities off the balance sheet, which is too bad, because knowing that you have an annuity for the rest of your life solves a problem. I advise friends and family about they're getting close to retirement. What do they do? And you don't know if you're going to live to be 85 or 105.
Right.
And so trying to figure out how to invest your money, where if you have the traditional defined benefit, there's this cross subsidization. The person who dies at 65, some money is available there for the person who lives to be 105. And so it solves that problem where we all have to, with DC, we have to budget like we can live to be 95 or 105, which most of us aren't.
I do want to kind of bring it back to what I think a lot of our listeners might be interested in, which is, are you guys now interviewing new managers, or the world of COVID is certainly has made business development challenging for a lot of different asset managers. Are you guys meeting new managers? What are you guys doing on that front?
Yeah, so it mentioned before, we have preferred lists which are constantly being refreshed, and so you have to keep meeting new managers because you have to refresh that list. Some people you had confidence in a year or two ago, you maybe have less confidence in today, and it's time to move on. So that process is ongoing, but it's all virtual right now. Zoom works fine for introductory meetings. We're making it work for the deeper due diligence. We wanted to meet an entire investment team. I prefer face-to-face. Hopefully before too long, we can sort of get back out there and see managers. Now, some of the routine meetings, Zoom is much more efficient. We don't have to bother traveling. But if you really want to get to know organization, meet the people and the investment people, top to bottom, the CIO, the chief portfolio manager, a couple of analysts, do they tell the same story? Do they think the same way? Is it someone whose process you have confidence in? Sitting across from a table from them just works better than sitting across the camera from them.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. There's some business that just needs to be done in person, right? You get to learn a little bit more about the organization, the process, and the people, really. And so, in my role, I one of our focuses is ESG, and just given all the different whether it's climate change or a lot of these different social issues that have arisen in the last year. You just see ESG everywhere, right? It's taken all the headlines, and so in terms of new managers or managers you're looking at, do you take into consideration ESG at all?
Yes, so any manager who isn't paying attention to ESG related issues in their investment decisions, I apologize. Any manager who isn't thinking about ESG related issues in their investment process is missing something. And so you have to wonder, if they're not thinking about that, what else aren't they thinking about? So that'd be concerning. As far as specific ESG oriented mandates, no, our clients are all almost entirely ERISA. We're ERISA fiduciaries, and so our mandate is to find the best managers, the best investment strategies, generate the best investment outcomes we can for them. And ESG should be part of that, but it can't be a mandate there. Although I do wonder, we're seeing, get managers, look at managers, and you get a pitch book, and the manager has biographies and pictures with every biography. And every once in a while, you come across one, there's nothing but white guys across the page, and just wonder, what are they thinking? They know it's nothing but white men. Why rub it in people's noses by having the pictures there? At least get, they should be out there trying to add some diversity to the firm, but at least get rid of the pictures. Don't showcase the fact that there's nothing but white men.
Yeah, no, and that's certainly something that I think our industry faces a lot of. And so there's clearly been a big movement, maybe not ESG, but I know there's been a big movement to support a lot of minority owned organizations, minority owned asset managers, not simply because they're minority owned, but also because from what we discussed earlier, which was diversification of thought, right? And you can have that with a minority-led organization. So that's certainly been, I've heard from various asset owners that is, something that they're looking to fold into their manager selection process. And so I think that's where the industry is headed towards. And so to your point, the page with all the old white males, hopefully that there is,
Hopefully there's
a
one of us on there.
change, a little bit of a change, right? And, certainly I think Tide and everything that Grace is doing with Tide has certainly helped to move that needle and move us forward. So, thank you, Grace. And I wanted to definitely thank you, Ralph, for your time and joining me and having this very important discussion in today's world.
Thanks, Lily and Grace and Tide. I'm happy to help out.